What's up, guys? Josh here, and today we're going to be talking about the food pyramid. In this first part of the video, we're going to watch Jordan Peterson give some information on the food pyramid that will probably shock some of you. I know it shocked me, and we're going to cover if or how it's a scam, and spoiler alert, it seems to be, and why this is so important. So the diet, this food pyramid, and the standard American diet as a whole consists of is outrageously high in carbs and sugars and processed foods. And this causes spikes in blood sugar and insulin levels. It causes body and brain inflammation, which causes brain fog. It slows your mind. It makes it more difficult to think, to speak, to understand things, and to recall, to recollect, to remember. And on top of all of that, this diet causes all sorts of literal diseases, including heart disease, right? It causes diabetes, it causes obesity, and a destructive horde of health problems and psychological problems. So this is the layout for this video. We're mostly going to watch Jordan Peterson discuss these issues, and I'll give you a couple brief but I think helpful bits in the middle. Then at the end, I'll give you some honestly pretty scandalous information about the food pyramid, right? How it came into existence. And we'll cover how to avoid this diet and create an improved diet using elimination diets. And also we'll cover a bit about our psychological diet, which is equally important at bare minimum.
I'm more interested in psychological matters, let's say, than physical or physiological matters. I know they overlap, but my attention doesn't naturally gravitate that way. But I have definitely learned that many of the things that I would have been tempted to assume were psychological aren't. I mean, I've known for a long time, for example, that endogenous depression, the schizophrenic disorders, and manic depression, I never thought of those as psychological disorders. I thought, no, those people are sick. We just don't know what's wrong with them. The dementia spectrum of illnesses, and that includes Parkinson's, by the way, might well be preventable with interventions that are early enough in life, and that many of those interventions might be dietary in nature.
We all collectively have, these really scary knowledge gaps, which only become apparent to you when, you're
and then you just get more scared because you start to understand how big the knowledge gaps are. Yeah. I've never recovered from finding out that the food pyramid was a scam.
Yeah.
That was just the degree to which that's a scam is, I don't know, is there a worse medical crime in history than that?
No. I mean, telling Americans to load up on 7 to 11 servings of grains every single day.
Yeah. And to find out that was a marketing ploy by the Department of Agriculture and that they went against the advice even of their own consultants who warned them that they would produce an epidemic of obesity and diabetes, which is, and not to say nothing of depression and dementia, which is exactly what we have now.
Exactly.
It's like, I don't know what you even do when you find out that that's true.
Yeah, and the unwarranted demonization of natural fat-containing foods, nutrient-dense foods like animal-source foods, which continue to be demonized.
Even by the American Diabetic, is it Association Society? I don't remember which one is still pushing the notion that, diabetics can eat carbohydrates. Like, actually, I don't think so. I don't think that's a very good idea since they're converted to sugar. And for example,
and then they're essentially glucose intolerant, right? Like it's madness, and what that demonization of these like natural whole foods. I mean, we live in a time where 60% of the calories that your average American consumes comes from what are called ultra processed foods.
Right.
So the
center of the supermarket.
Exactly, the antithesis to whole foods, right?
Yeah.
So the idea that we're still demonizing whole foods to me is insane.
Yeah, and causes insanity too. So it's not just insane, it's a cause of insanity. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is not...
What do you think of RFK, just out of curiosity? Because I'm sorry, that's a non sequitur in a sense, but not exactly. Like, I've never seen another politician make an issue of health.
Yeah.
Right? Of general health at the level that we're discussing it.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously COVID became an issue and public health is an issue, but Kennedy is the only candidate I've ever seen who's calling out the reprehensible, mostly corporate actors who are poisoning, well, everyone fundamentally.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I think he's an incredibly important voice in that regard. And I hope that no matter what happens in November, I hope that he finds a way to continue his advocacy. I mean, I'm obviously, completely aligned with, with the notion that we do need to start doing things differently.
Well, what's the obesity? What's the percentage of Americans now who are obese?
By 2030, 1 in 2. And this is not just overweight. This is like frank obesity.
Right. And so the morbidly obese will be 1 in 5?
1 in 2 Americans will be obese in 2030. That's his projection. Currently, according to the CDC, 41.9% of adults in the United States were obese between 2017 and 2020. There's a reason no one trusts the media or the government these days. Whether you think the elites are pulling the strings like a puppet master from the top, or that it's just a natural, non-conspiratorial consequence of human nature and the inevitable corruption of any authoritative system, we can all agree that we were badly misled. And it has had severe consequences on our health, our ability to live life fully, to think clearly, to be strong, to be healthy, even to be happy. Obesity absolutely spikes your chances of developing chronic conditions like heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, and many other complications that literally shaves years off of your life. I think the last study that I looked at, it said it could shave 3 to 10 years off of your life, depending on the severity of the obesity, of course. Not only that, it causes joint problems, reduces your mobility, it lowers your overall quality of life, both physically and psychologically, emotionally. It's very important to handcraft a diet that keeps obesity at bay. But how? How do you avoid this obesity, this brain inflammation, mind degradation, ultimately? How do you fight it? Well, it's actually really simple. We have to lower carbs, sugars, and processed foods, right? Those 3 are absolute killers. If you cut the majority of those things out of your diet, you're golden. It really is that simple, right? You do that and you're 90% of the way there, right? That alone is enough to carve the fat off of your body and make you far, far healthier. And I know this from very direct and personal experience. Every time I go back to the SAD diet, the standard American diet, the fat piles on, and every time I cut off of that, I go on an elimination diet like the carnivore or modified carnivore or keto. It just slides right off. It just burns off within a month or 2, something like that. And I think that's generally the general consensus when it comes to those sorts of diets, right? Cutting carbs and sugars out of your diet and processed foods as well. It does wonders, not just for your body, but for your brain, for your mind. The brain fog I used to get, the lack of clarity and the ability to speak clearly and remember things properly. Man, before on the SAD diet, it was incredibly difficult. I had a lot of brain fog. Whenever I go on an elimination diet, and I've been doing it for years and years now, the mental clarity, my memory is just through the roof. Comparatively.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. And obesity is a risk factor for
everything.
Pretty much everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
and the cure isn't fat positivity. No, definitely not.
No. I mean, you can be more or less healthy at any given size, but it's less healthy to be obese.
Yeah.
There was a seminal NIH-funded study led by Kevin Hall, who's a highly regarded obesity researcher, who found that when you give people an ultra-processed diet to consume and you tell them to eat to satiety, it's called ad libitum feeding in the literature, they end up consuming a calorie surplus of 500 additional calories. So you do that every single day for a week. That's a pound of fat gain every single week.
Right.
And conversely, when they gave them these minimally processed foods, they saw them eat to the same degree of satiety, fullness, but coming in effortlessly at a calorie deficit of about 300 calories. So that's an 800 calorie swing.
I looked for a long time into the literature pertaining to maintenance of cognitive function across time, because there's a linear decrease in your fluid intelligence. So that's G, essentially, the central measure of cognitive ability. It starts to decline in your early 20s. It's pretty linear. And so that's a drag. And then you might say, well, what can you do to forestall that? And there were many companies, none of which seem to exist anymore on the internet, that were claiming that, daily cognitive exercises could increase your IQ or forestall cognitive degeneration. But the literature always indicated that your best bet in that regard was both aerobic and non-aerobic exercise, because the brain is such a rapacious it has such rapacious metabolic demand. If you're physiologically compromised, then your brain's going to suffer first.
Yeah.
So it's so funny, eh? The best thing for your brain is to be a gym jock. So that's really hilarious in a terrible way.
All right. Now let's cover that scandalous information about the food pyramid, how it came to being and such. So on the carb side of things, the food pyramid was heavily influenced by food industry lobbyists. And this is information accessible to the public. This is common information now. This is not a conspiracy in any way, shape, or form. It was heavily influenced by food industry lobbyists, particularly those from the dairy, meat, and grain industries. But the grain industry in particular had gained the most power and influence. And you could see that in the food pyramid. Right, they were able to strong-hand government officials and agencies like the USDA and the U.S. Senate Select Committee of Nutrition and Human Needs into prioritizing the farming industry's interests over public health, despite the clear and strong evidence that excessive carb consumption could contribute and would contribute to obesity and chronic diseases. Then on the sugar side of things, in the 1960s and 1970s, something very similar happened. The sugar industry funded research that downplayed the negative health effects of sugar and shifted the blame to fats as the primary dietary culprit for heart disease and other health issues. There's a lot more to go into, but we'll leave it at that for now. Only recently, all of this has come to light. Relatively recently, and people are waking up to the fact that we have been duped, quite frankly, convinced that high carb and sugar intake is okay or even healthy, when it was actually making us literally dumber, slower, fatter, and was slowly killing us. All right, so what that brings us to is fighting it. How do we fight it? Again, the key to fighting this is to change your diet to eliminate most of those carbs, sugars, and processed foods, hence elimination, right? The elimination in elimination diets. So diets like keto, carnivore, or even just a semi-carnivore diet, whatever it's called. It might just be called semi-carnivore, or low carb, low sugar. I guess those are one and the same. If you really want to keep the veggies on your plate, for example, I totally get that. And remember, what you put into your body directly affects your mind, right? And what affects your body affects your brain, and what affects your brain affects your mind. The better you keep your body in shape through diet and exercise, the more effective and powerful your mind will ultimately be. But the information we consume, that's another thing, right? The books, the videos, courses, movies, shows, podcasts, etc. These have an equally powerful effect, or even more powerful effect, right? Remember, archetypal stories like fairy tales, legends, myths, scriptures, these stories have stood the test of time, and they're like tuning forks for the mind, right? They will inevitably shape your psyche and the totality of your being into the spirit behind the story. That's how this works, right? So in everything you consume, I want to encourage you to aim at the highest thing that you can conceptualize. And as far as I can tell, that is the logos. So that's all I have for you for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like, subscribe, share this video with your friends and family, and thank you. I will see you in the next one. You are what you consume. You are what you eat applies obviously to your physical body as well. One of the things that's incredibly important to get across is the fact that sugars are incredibly unhealthy, right? That's been well established at this point. Look into the studies, you'll see what I mean. And carbs are right up there as well. I tend to eat low carb at bare minimum. I did keto for a while, really like that, and currently I'm on the carnivore diet, which is an interesting one. That one, the verdict's still out on that, but I have to say, I feel absolutely amazing. I'm going to keep it simple. The reason I bring up things like the keto diet or the carnivore diet is because there are certain types of diets that are healthier for you than the food pyramid or your typical, what is it called? The standard American diet, SAD acronym. In America, the vast majority of us are obese. And it's because of this SAD diet. It's because of the supernormal stimuli of sugars and carbs and fats. Of course, on a low carb diet, you're going to want those fats. You're burning those fats as fuel. But on the standard American diet, fats are in addition to all these carbs that we're already storing in our bodies, the sugars that we're putting in our bodies that are transforming into fat. Like it's way too much fat. And what's even more sad is the fact that it's not just our bodies that are out of shape, our minds are as well. We focus probably more on our physical diets, the food that we put into our bodies, than we do on the symbols, the words, the information that we put into our minds and our hearts. And the result is spiritual obesity, psychological malnutrition, atrophy, whatever you want to call it. But the amazing thing is the fact that we can actually flip that around, right? In the same way that we can start eating properly and cut the sugars out of our diets, etc., we can do the same for our minds. Right now, we're so bombarded by information. It's like drinking out of a fire hydrant, all the information that we receive on a daily basis. But if we're strategic about it, we can block out the information that is not helping us and it is, in fact, tearing us down, and only allow the information in that is building us up and transforming us into the ideal versions of ourselves.